We've been teased about the Canon RF 200 to 500mm going back to 2021. A lens for pro wildlife and sports photographers, a perfect match for the Canon EOS R3 and the recently announced R1, with its constant f4 aperture throughout the entire range. But then in November, earlier this month, Canon rumors dashed our hopes, stating, "We've now been told twice in the last little while that Canon will release the RF 200 to 500mm f5.6, also an L-series image stabilized USM lens, but not an f4. We just received an update. A source allegedly has information about the aperture, whether it's going to be an f4 or an f5.6, as well as the time frame. But before we get to the details, please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything, helps this channel grow, and keeps you up to date on the latest camera coverage. On April the 13th, 2021, it was said that Canon will be bringing us a successor to the EF 200 to 400mm, and it would be called the RF 200 to 500mm f4 L-series image stabilized USM. Canon rumors said, "We've been told that the two following lenses are in development and will arrive in 2022. But actually, the first mention of the 200 to 500mm can actually be traced back to 2019, where we've been told that on more than one occasion, Canon's working on the RF 200 to 500mm L-series zoom, and we could see it in late 2020. The Canon RF 200 to 500mm f4 L image stabilized USM lens is kind of like, well, Bigfoot. It's always being spotted, but no one's ever got a photograph, with the exception of this grainy photo from 50 years ago. 2021 turned into 2022, 2022 into 2023. But it wasn't until September that we actually got a much closer date. Instead of getting pushed into the following year, we had a date that was far closer, that seemed far more plausible than any of the previous dates. The long-rumored Canon RF 200 to 500mm f4 L-series image stabilized USM has been tipped to be announced in November by various people. But sadly, despite all the rumors of a potential November announcement, we were told that we won't see the lens until Q1 of 2025. But even more sadder, that's not the worst news. We've now been told twice in the last little while that Canon will release the RF 200 to 500mm, and it's going to be an f5.6, still L series, still image stabilized, and still a USM, not an f4. I'm not sure what to think about the RF 200 to 500mm being an f5.6. But I could see some reasoning behind the choice. One is that it will be less expensive than going f4. As you're well aware of, the EF 200 to 400mm f4 L image stabilized USM 1.4 times launched at a price of $11,000. And fair points to Canon rumors, but Canon's been working on the 200 to 500mm f4 for the better part of 8 years. And then all of a sudden, in late 2024, it's now an f5.6? I'm not so sure that I believe that. And thanks to a source of mine, he's telling me in clear and uncertain terms that it's going to be an f4. November's half over. And despite what several sources have told me, I've learned one thing, especially here in 2024, that even if you're told something by credible sources that is true at this moment of time, things can change. Just look at the R5 Mark II and the R1. They were supposed to be announced in Q1. And then things got moved to Q2 in May. And then once again, they got moved until July. And it wasn't until just last week that Canon started shipping the R1. That's essentially a 1-year delay. So I tried checking with other sources on the f4 versus f5.6. And I was told that, well, they didn't have information about it being f4, f5.6. They'd be really surprised if Canon went with f5.6. But as far as the date, I did get a whisper of information, and I was told that Q1 of 2025, well, it's certainly reasonable. But the big question is, what is holding things up? Canon's been working on the fabled 200 to 500mm as long as they've been working on the global shutter, with neither making it to the market. Is it because of the engineering challenges, the cost, or both? It's clear that Canon spent an awful lot of money redesigning their lenses to reduce the size, the number of components, and the cost while also increasing the optics. Dozens upon dozens of patent applications prove this point. With the EF 200 to 400 mm still selling and costing a pretty penny of $11,099, don't expect the 200 to 500 mm f4 to be cheap. And I get it, Canon has surprised us with lenses like the 200 to 800 mm, making it less expensive than expected. But most new Canon RF lenses usually cost more, if not a lot more, than their predecessors, at least if one existed. But I do have a sliver of good news. If you're willing to invest in the EF version, the EF 200 to 400 mm f4 L-series image stabilized USM, it can be had for 40% off. That's right, 40% off. But once the Canon RF 200 to 500 mm f4 is announced for pre-order, I just ask one favor from you. If you're interested in pre-ordering this lens, then please consider using my affiliate links in the description down below, because they really do help support the channel. In fact, they keep the lights on. You'll notice that nowhere in this video was anywhere from a 30-second, 60-second, or even 90-second spot from Squarespace, a VPN service, or something else. It's because I don't believe in doing that. I believe that if you want to pay money to YouTube to not have ads in your video, I shouldn't be putting one in there, at least not in the first minute or two. I think it's frustrating. So my commitment to you is to continue putting affiliate links, pre-order links in the description, and I should be able to get enough revenue from that to avoid doing that. And a big thanks to all of you that have used my affiliate links and pre-order links in the past. It really does help support this channel, and a big thanks to you. Now, for transparency's sakes, I do get anywhere from 2 to 5% back from purchases. And again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. But there is one other thing I want to talk to you about. Tomorrow, Sony's going to be announcing the Alpha 1 Mark II. We'll start our live coverage at 8 a.m. in the morning, 1 hour before Sony's event, where we'll provide live coverage with my expert panel. Will the Sony A1 II provide enough enhancements to entice Canon and Nikon customers? And they're also announcing their first f2 in the 28 to 70 for a price of around $29.99. Sounds like a bit of a competition for Canon's RF 28 to 70 f2, doesn't it? While it initially sold at $29.99, it's currently on sale. Interesting. Now, we are hearing from many that this is going to be what we would call a ho-hum or yawn update. It's not going to be a big update, but I'm not willing to pass judgment yet. As we saw with the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, some people thought it was a yawn update, while others, myself included, saw it as a big update. It really depends on what you need out of the camera. I'm really expecting what Sony's going to do is the same thing that Canon did with the R5 Mark II, and that's greatly improve its enhanced artificial intelligence capabilities. It's an autofocus system, and that's where I think we're going to see the biggest updates. So 8 a.m. Tuesday, November the 19th. And maybe, just maybe, that could be our last announcement of the year, unless, of course, what Canon Rumors is saying about another lens announcement coming in November. We've only got 2 weeks left, so we'll just have to wait and see. But thank you so much for tuning in. Have yourself a great day, a great week, and we'll see you again soon.